So they want to put a Sprung Shelter into our nation's capital. Well, what is it? Where do they want to build it? And why here? These are all, of course, natural questions for any resident in the national capital to ask, but while they're important questions, it's not directed at the right people. We shouldn't be asking the City of Ottawa or the National Capital Commission at all. We should be asking our federal government. After all, it's the Trudeau Liberals who refused to act on illegal border crossings back in 2018 until they were forced to during the pandemic of March 2020. They've taken more migrants than almost any other developed nation. They've not done background checks. At least that's what we know from the temporary foreign worker program. And the pressure it's put on our existing services like healthcare, education, and social services has been a massive strain in communities across the country. When I was immigration minister for the province of Ontario in 2018, I challenged the federal government and said it would cost $200 million just in our province for those types of programs. Now, if you ask the federal government anything, they rarely have any details, but they're quick to respond with racist or un-Canadian charges, just like they did to me.
It's irresponsible, it's divisive, it's fear-mongering, and it is not Canadian.
But let's take a look at what I said in May of 2019.
The failed border policies of the Trudeau Liberals are failing Canadians and those that dream of becoming a Canadian. The impacts have been felt on our social assistance system, our education system, the healthcare system, and in our emergency shelter system within our largest municipalities in Toronto and Ottawa. I've enjoyed working with Minister Bill Blair and appreciate his style, but it's clear that the federal Liberals want to drag this discussion out and not fund the mounting cost Ontario faces. Yesterday, I called on Toronto Mayor John Tory to speak out in support of Ontario's months-old request to the federal government for $200 million in compensation.
Status of the conversation with the federal government here about putting up, I know at one point the number was $200 million. Did you get the money? What's the status of the conversation about what you need?
So thank you very much. Obviously, the conversation started off in a very toxic way with the federal Minister of Immigration calling me un-Canadian when I'd requested support for our shelter systems, as well as our education and our social assistance programs in Ontario. As a result of the influx in Quebec of the illegal or irregular border crossers, it cost Ontario taxpayers about $200 million. So we said, you know, the border issue is your issue. We would appreciate it if you fix it, but if you're not going to, at least provide us with some assistance at the tune of $200 million.
Your point is this is 100% Ottawa's responsibility, the federal government's responsibility.
Absolutely. If people are coming through, non-recognized ports of entry, there is a process in place for those who come here through the Safe Third Country Act. So we're simply saying if you're going to depart from the immigration and refugee asylum-seeking situation that we should have in the province and throughout the rest of the country, then you're going to have to, come up to the plate with a substantial amount of money. Here's the situation. We are now putting in $90 million in additional funds as a result of this crossing issue for people who may be turned back in the next 24 months. We are now putting in $20 million into our education system and our post-secondary education system because of the challenges that we're facing as a result of the federal government's failed border policies. So I think that, what's really important here is that they recognize that if they're going to create a policy, they're going to have to pay for it. Or if they're going to ignore their policy, they should be paying for it. And so I'm going to maintain my position and Ontario's position that the federal government needs to step up to the plate. You don't have to just take my word for it, as I say. The Auditor General, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and every single province signed on with Premier Ford just last August.
Taking a look again at what bringing in these migrants will mean, look at how it will contribute to more pressures on our medical system. We don't have enough family doctors. Or if you look at the schools, many of them have portables. And I don't have to tell any parent or young person what it's like with a housing crisis and the supply issues that we've had as a result of the federal failure. This has all been created by a Liberal government that has either been asleep at the switch, ill-prepared for their job, or absolutely incompetent. It's also because of the Minister of Immigration and Housing Minister back then, Ahmed Hussein, and the current Housing Minister and former Immigration Minister, Fraser. The questions we really need to ask them: is there a better, more permanent and dignified solution elsewhere on federal land, closer to core services and transportation? Can the federal Liberals under Justin Trudeau commit to paying for the costs of their disastrous policies as a result of what's happening at our provincial and municipal levels? Will they provide us with the information on demographics and the studies that they've taken? We should know, for example, if we proceed with Sprung Shelters, what will the community look like? How many children will be in the new communities? And will they go to our schools and our daycares? How many seriously injured or post-traumatic stress disorder migrants will be coming into the communities who will rely on our precious healthcare resources? How many seniors are going to require long-term care support? How many women who may be escaping violence against spouses or others will require shelter and support? Is there a plan in place against sex trafficking and human trafficking? How many men will be coming and what are their ages in terms of reskilling purposes and getting them into the workforce? How many students will go into our universities? Are we going to be bringing into our communities? These are all types of serious questions, questions that we need answers to. We've recently found out through the temporary foreign worker program, the Trudeau Liberals continually ignored the advice of their bureaucrats and decided not to move forward with background checks on those coming into the country. Will they be honest with us and tell us if they've done the same thing with migrants? We also have to ask Sean Fraser, Ahmed, Hussein, and Mark Miller, along with the Trudeau Liberals, are they planning on fixing the broken IRCC process now? It takes 2 years for a migrant or refugee to get a response to their claim for asylum purposes. Think about that. We could be housing somebody for 2 years who will eventually be deported. Is that safe for our community? Is that sane for our government? So my question is this: don't you think that we have a right to these answers? The process is broken. The real issue at stake here is the federal government putting us all in this predicament at the levels of government that they're not responsible for. We deserve better than a federal government that makes a mess out of immigration and refugee resettlement and then causes a housing crisis in our fast-growing communities without any answers to the questions that I've posed to them with respect to demography, geography, and who's footing the final bill. These are questions that we're asking for residents across this country and as concerned citizens. We don't deserve a plan for immigration, refugee resettlement, and housing that doesn't have these answers.